Pharmakon, an ancient Greek word meaning both poison and remedy, often simultaneously. Boxing is pharmakon. It gives boxers a livelihood with occasional unbridled wealth, and yet the main goal of many practitioners is to enter and exit the sport as soon as possible while incurring minimal damage. This damage is the poison.
Any advice you give him as an amateur boxer?
As an amateur boxer?
Yeah. We got our silver gloves here, Junior.
Switch to soccer.
I feel boxing is increasingly viewed by its participants as a necessary evil. With continued research into CTE and head trauma, coupled with decreased enthusiasm for the sport globally, it does appear like the love of the sweet science has rescinded. Even some top boxers seem sapped of motivation.
25 is after next year, I'm out of it.
No, let me be real, Chris. I don't want to be. Don't be stupid, lad. Don't stop. Listen, I'm feeling sorry for yourself.
What's next? Really, maybe retirement. I think I need to take some time. I really want to help the kids out in the boxing world. But we'll think about it. You know what I'm saying? I've done a lot in my sport, and I don't get loved enough from my end. You know, I think that's what happens when you're great and, you know, people hate.
But why exactly are fighters falling out of love with the sport? Are they desperate to retire with their mental faculties intact? Are boxing's political and business sides killing their drive? Let's explore historic examples of elite boxers who are not particularly fond of the sweet science, before examining possible reasons for young fighters not caring about leaving lasting legacies. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and please leave a like for the algorithm. Tunney, a prominent heavyweight boxer who twice bettered Jack Dempsey, was unlike any other. He simply deemed boxing as a pastime to secure wealth, education, and marry a prominent woman. On internet forums, debates revolve around Tunney's alleged hatred of boxing. He certainly felt he was above the politics and intrigue, underlined by his incessant reading of books, quoting of Shakespeare, and affected manners. His learned approach was further reflected in the ring, with his autobiography noting he was highly reluctant to hit wounded opponents, purposely taking mercy on opponents like Tommy Gibbons. Years later, in the British Parliament, Tunney's memoir was cited. After being unconscious for 2 days, I decided to get out while I still retained my sanity. Years later, he admitted he had retired at just 31 through fear of losing his eyesight or suffering brain damage in the ring. There's a reason he was labelled the brainiest champion, and although he enjoyed the technical side of pugilism, he evidently despised much of the drama and brutality behind it. The Howard Davis Jr. case study showcases how deep feelings of resentment can come about towards boxing. See, Davis had been the golden boy of boxing at the Montreal Olympics in 1976, winning both the lightweight gold and the Val Barker trophy ahead of boxers like Sugar Ray Leonard and Michael Spinks. With an amateur record of 125-5, he progressed into the pro ranks with great optimism, having signed a contract for CBS TV, promising profits of $1.5 million. But abundant money and skill can only carry one so far. In fact, in April 1979, Davis would go on record to say, "I hate boxing. You name any part of the boxing routine and I hate it. Getting up early in the morning, going to the gym, working through the training routines, stepping into the ring for a fight, I hate it all." He then added, "I wouldn't be associated with boxing in any way after I quit. I seldom watch fights on TV." Sadly, this dislike suggested a lack of drive, which probably contributed to his shock loss to Scotland's Jim Watts just over a year later, and possibly the Edwin Rosario defeat in June 1984. But the truth was much more complex. Davis had lost his 37-year-old mother to a heart attack just 3 days prior to the Montreal Olympics, battling grief to secure gold. Having dedicated the victory to her, I feel you can see why boxing became an albatross around his neck, constantly reminding him of an incredibly painful ordeal. It's therefore unsurprising that he took more of an interest in real estate and music, specifically jazz and disco. And by early 1982, it was believed that, due partly to his father's influence, he didn't want to fight, leading to inactivity. Despite insanely quick hands, exceptional talent, and financial backing, the American's career never fulfilled the hype.
Chris saying that boxing is a mug's game. We've got something to show you. It's a piece of our own artwork. Perhaps you'd like to home in on that. It's a mug's game. And I'd say this, a Shakespearean quote for you young man to learn. How much sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless child. That's from all the professional boxers in this country.
On the British boxing circuit, Chris Eubank Sr. has been heavily reprimanded for his jaundiced comments about boxing. He labelled the sport as a mug's game, implying that fighters were simply pawns in a system in which their mental capacity and well-being were being gambled away for nowhere near the correct financial payoff. Remember, this quote referred to the 1990s fight game and came from a black fighter's mouth, so perspective is key here. Errol Christie had suffered massively at the hands of greedy promoters and managers throughout the 1980s, even stating in his autobiography that a major player in British boxing told him he'd have to fight for far less money due to the colour of his skin. So Eubank understandably resented the business side, yet he still seemed to live and breathe the sweet science, embracing the pain and suffering which came with it.
You know, I've been in fights where I wanted to wet myself, the beating was so bad, but I had no choice. Why? Because integrity doesn't allow.
In the modern arena, we have seen a spate of early retirements from the sport. Scottish bantamweight boxer Kash Farouk retired at just 26, boasting a 16-1 record and notable victories over Luis Castillo and Alexander Espinosa. He later cited doctors' advice and unsatisfactory yearly medicals as the reason for retirement. Meanwhile, Liam Williams, who challenged for the WBO interim light middleweight title in 2017, was a similar casualty, citing several concussions as the determining factor. But this doesn't suggest a hatred for the sport. It instead implies boxers are simply prioritising their health over fame and financial profit. Though past champions and greats were far more blasé and dedicated perhaps.
See, Ali, that's the only thing about Ali. When you were watching Ali get beaten up as an old man, even that was a young kid, he's not going to quit. You got to kill him. He won't quit. Even he was getting beat up every round, getting the shit kicked out of him by Larry Holmes. And it's a champ. No, come on out, let me out, come on out. They wouldn't stop. He would have to stay up there and just take the beating like a man. He wouldn't quit.
And you know, he was just so disciplined. Like, nobody was more conditioned than Hagler. Nobody. Like he would just, when he fought Mugabe, he just kept the heat on him. Just kept the heat on him.
Yet the problem is, the current elite crop of fighters are far too aware of what is likely to happen if you have this never say die attitude. Whether this be Muhammad Ali suffering from the horrific symptoms of Parkinson's disease, or Jerry Quarry.
Oh man.
Jerry is only 50 years old. He lives with his brother James.
He loves Coca-Cola.
Because he can't take care of himself anymore.
Ice cream. It wasn't any one particular fight. It was a combination of over the years of taking punches to the head.
Imagine 2 decades of your head being knocked around with this kind of force.
The reality is that these modern fighters are more aware than ever of the dangers. It's therefore unsurprising that many want to achieve financial freedom before exiting the sport as soon as possible. Legacy is no longer everything to these boxers, but there has to be more to this issue. Fighters may be becoming more materialistic, simply deeming boxing as a quick means of securing flashy cars, watches and houses, whilst never truly caring about the sweet science itself. Chris Eubank Jr. has been accused of being like a part-time fighter, preferring to play poker and dress in $10,000 outfits than truly push for a world boxing title. His father evidently held greater ambition. Or look at Devin Haney, he literally has a GQ segment dedicated to his jewellery collection. With work values becoming more materialistic across the board, it's fairly unsurprising that boxers are keen to make money above establishing a legacy really. A more niche point, but sometimes overlooked I feel, is the role of religion.
I pray every morning at 5 o'clock. My clock rings at 4:30. I'm up at 5, I take a shower, and I put my white robe on, I put the towel on the floor, and I face the east, towards Mecca.
People want salvation, but they're not doing the requirements of salvation.
Not only does adhering to religious principles cement discipline and keep boxers on the right track, but fighters are likely to be more confident and less afraid venturing into the ring. If you believe the Lord is on your side, then you will understandably push yourself further. With religion declining in the West specifically, this could suggest the fall in fighters' motivations to build legacies, though I don't think it's the primary factor. Or are we just seeing boxers go into the sport with a sense of entitlement? It does feel as though we're increasingly seeing more offspring of former greats descending upon the ring. Take Conor Benn for example. Although he looks impressive in training footage and is never worried about running his mouth, he's yet to truly fight anyone of note. Ultimately, his upbringing has been wildly different from that of his father, Nigel, who came from a poor family in East London and refined his boxing at both the West Ham Amateur Boxing Club and whilst in the army in Northern Ireland. These experiences would have toughened him up massively. Meanwhile, Conor Benn has instantly had access to the best coaches and knowledge, while Nigel really did have to graft for everything he got. So there are now fighters who aren't nearly as prepared to bite down on their gum shields when the going gets tough, as they simply aren't as used to the struggle. This could be a contributing factor towards the antipathy towards boxing. It's an incredibly hard endeavour, and these offspring simply aren't ready for the struggle it seems. In the case of Gervonta Davis, it's abundantly clear that he's not entirely in love with the sport.
Every time you go up to a fight, you gotta always worry about what somebody gonna do to you. You know how good you are, but it's still like, what can he bring to the table that, you know? He might bring something like crazy like that night, or you might be off. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's a love-hate for the sport, but
in fact, he's recently implied that he'll look to retire in 2025, showcasing war-weary-like symptoms towards the sweet science. It's hard to tell exactly why he's taken this stance. Perhaps he's bluffing to secure more lucrative deals with promoters or networks. Maybe he's following the Mayweather model of carefully selecting opponents before retiring undefeated. Or he could just be thinking about his well-being and his kids, seeking to leave the sport with his mental faculties still intact. I've even heard a theory that he's seeking to retire to work through his anger management issues. At the age of just 30, it does appear strange, but as someone who's never stepped into the ring, who am I really to judge his decision? Let's just hope he fights Shakur, Teofimo or Haney before he leaves. But now I'd like to hear what you guys think. Are the fighters nowadays just unbothered with creating long-lasting legacies? With the rising knowledge on CTE, are boxers simply smart to get in and out of the fight game as soon as possible with their brains fully functional? I'm very keen to hear what you all think about this topic. It's a trend which is ultimately taking place on both sides of the pond, so I doubt it's a cultural thing really. Maybe the new generation are just lazy and work shy. Okay, boomer. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing, it really does mean the most. More content is on its way. See you soon. Cheers.